All right, now let's talk about lists. Here we have a few different types of lists. We have horizontal or inline lists and vertical lists with green ticks. One thing that is common across all these lists is that they don't have the default bullet points. The same applies to all the links in the nav bar and the footer. So back to our style sheet, let's define a new section called lists. Here I'm going to define a list class and set list style to none to get rid of the default bullet point. Also, I want to get rid of the left padding that all browsers apply by default. So padding left, 0. Now, another thing that is common between different types of lists is the color of the text. So our lists are not inheriting the main body text color. They have a different color. This is the color that we are using for our headings. The same applies in this horizontal or inline list. So let's set the color to var color headings. All right, now to test this, back to our markup, let's add a UL with the class of list. And inside this UL, we're going to add 3 list items. Now I want to give each list item a label. So we type li, then in curly braces, we type our label, let's say item, and then we add a $sign, which will be replaced by numbers like 1, 2, 3, and so on. So at the end, we multiply this by 3, press tab, and here's what we get. Great. So back to the browser. Here's a basic list template. Now let's create a variation of this list called inline list. So once again, we want to apply object-oriented CSS principles and separate structure from skin. So back to our style sheet, we define a new class, list, double hyphens, inline. Now in inline lists, we want to convert each list item to an inline element, but we don't want to add the list item element here because now our CSS knows about our HTML structure. So we're going to go back to our markup and give each list item a class. So we're going to add multiple cursors here and then type class equals list double underscores item. So once again, we're using the BEM convention. In BEM, we separate a block from its elements using double underscores. So this item is an element inside this block. It's not another block or another component that can exist on its own. It's an internal part of this list, okay? Now, back to our styles. So we're going to target items with a class of list double underscore item. Here we set their display to inline, but with this, we're not going to be able to apply margins. So a better approach is to set this to inline block. Now, back to our markup, let's convert this to an inline list. So list, double hyphens, inline. And by the way, did you see the auto completion? This is coming from one of the extensions we installed earlier. So list, inline. Good. All right, here's what we get, but the items are too close. So we need to give each item a right margin. So back to our style sheet, we give each item a right margin of 2 rems. Take a look. That's better. So we're done with inline or horizontal lists, but if you pay close attention here, these items are bold, but the items in our list are not bold. So shall we go back to the list class and set the font size to bold? No, we shouldn't. What if we want to have a list of items that are not bold? We don't want to apply this across the board. Otherwise, in different places, we'll have to come back and undo this style. So we shouldn't apply this property here. Our list should simply represent a plain list of objects. It can be vertical or horizontal, which we can also call inline. Anything extra should be applied in other places, perhaps using other skins, or maybe in this particular section, we want to display items as bold. Then, when building this entire component, we will make the list items bold. So we're done with the horizontal and vertical lists. Now, let's work on lists with this particular style. So we're going to define a new class or a new skin called list double hyphens tick. And of course, we can call it anything. Now, for these lists, we need this icon, tick.svg. You can find it in the icons folder of the zip file that I gave you earlier in the course. So here in the project folder, let's add a new folder called images. And then we're going to drop this file over here. Of course, we could drop all the icons and images, but I prefer to add only what we really need, okay? So we have this icon. It's an SVG file. back to this class, we're going to set list style image to, using the URL function, we're going to load our SVG file. So currently we're in the CSS folder. We have to go one level up, then go to images and load tick.svg. Now back to our markup. Let's change the skin from inline to tick. And then preview our changes. Where are the ticks? Well, they're kind of off the screen. To bring them, we need to apply a left padding to our list. So here we set padding left to 3 rems. Here they are. Now currently, these items are so close to green ticks. Here on mobile, look, we should have some space between the ticks and the items. So here we're going to define another rule. For lists with this particular skin, our items should have a left padding. So list item, we apply a padding left of 0.5 rem. So this is a good case for using nesting. We cannot avoid nesting here, because if we remove the tick skin, this style will be applied to all list items. This is not what we want. So this is where we want to use nesting, but as much as possible, we should avoid nesting because we'll end up with overly specific selectors. So here's what we get. Good. Now, if you look at the mobile version, you will see that we have some vertical space below each item. So we can fix that real quick by applying a bottom margin of 1 rem. Take a look. I think this is very close to what we have on mobile. Great. So we're done here. Now let's work on the desktop version. On desktop, the only difference that I noticed is that the space between ticks and the items is a little bit smaller. Take a look. See, the space is a bit smaller. So let's define another media query. 24 pixels. Here we're going to say, for lists with a tick skin, our items should have a padding left of 0. So on mobile, we apply 0.5 rem padding. On desktop, we apply 0 padding. Now let's test the changes. So here's the mobile version and here's the desktop version. Great. All right, we're done with this component. Now let's take a copy of this and store it as a template inside the components folder. So we add a new file called lists.html and paste this markup. Okay, so we're done. And just like always, now it's time to review our code and commit it to the repository.